The pervasive feeling is both comforted and creeped out. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Oh, oh, oh. I think she feels the same way. There's something off-putting about this, but mostly I find it very beautiful and peaceful. It's like a dream, or it's like being dead. Some of these tones are a little out of tune with themselves, or it's a tuning that we're not accustomed to. And it's playing a scale that I would say is Mixolydian. That was lucky. Which by itself conjures up a couple things for me. One is it feels kind of magical. It has a lot of the qualities of a major scale, but with one very, very important change, which is that the seventh note, like the top note basically in the scale, is lower. It gives this major scale kind of an edge. So there's this kind of droning chord of like a major chord the whole time. And then the melody actually played a minor third over it. Sorry, this note. Which you can interpret lots of different ways, but to me, it just added to the feeling of things being a little bit off. Let's move forward to An Eagle in Your Mind. Oh yeah, the panning was really intense at the beginning. But it's a little out of tune with the, you hear that? It's flatter. The quality of their sounds, it sounds so underwater. A lot of it has like a tape warmth and like a fuzzy, buzzy, yeah, watery sound. Okay, so these are intervals. God, I was not expecting that beat there. And then okay, and then this. Is that what's happening? See, it actually sounds a little like it makes more sense to my ear on the piano, because their stuff is just, again, it's just slightly like out of tune with itself. There were different layers that sort of slowly crept up on you. They got louder and louder. It had a good groove, and it definitely made me think, and it definitely made me feel something. So to me, that's the mark of successful art. Let's listen to The Color of the Fire. The conflict in that one for me was the vocal sample itself feels, there's like nostalgia and like sweetness and the innocence of the child, but the way it's stretched out and slowed is really uncanny and creeped me out. And then I think it sounds kind of like an E piano, or it had its moments of also feeling like really sweet and warm and it feels like a blanket, but the blanket is made of like cold, like smooth material, like a heavy translucent teal skin or something. It's just like there's something weird about it, and yet it feels like you're enveloped. There was one moment where it kind of felt like all the notes like converged into this, I think it was just like a major chord, which has a lot of, I think, warmth and comforting qualities about it, especially in this context. Let's see if I can find it. There. So cool, because before his little hum was really discordant with the piano, but worth noting that this little run is also in Mixolydian, that scale from Wildlife Analysis. That. Okay, so again, it's sharp. It's like not actually D. It's like somewhere between D and D sharp. That's beautiful to me. And that note sounds very sinister because it's a minor third. In the bass, sorry. After this, right? I mean, is this microtonal? I would not be surprised. That one feels hypnotic. At first, I was like, I'm never going to listen to the song again because it's creeping me out. And now I kind of just want to listen to it over and over again. I really want to hear the child say, I love you. Next is Telephasic Workshop. Ooh. Oh my God. They just resolved the progression for us. I would never think that they would do such a nice thing. This chord. And then it hit. And then, sorry. And then it goes to this one. It goes back to this one, then sometimes it goes back here before it finally makes its way all the way up to, and sometimes it does that, which is beautiful. beautiful, kind of how at the very beginning it did that. And my first thought was, oh, it's a Lydian song. But this progression does have a name, a fairly recent name, which is, is the Super Mario cadence. This chord at the top is like kind of where we're trying to get to the whole time. And this one is kind of this dramatic way to begin. And then it goes up and you kind of feel like it is heading somewhere, doesn't it? And then it goes back down. So then you kind of feel almost like a little stuck or like, a little incomplete. At least that's how I felt. And then finally when it gets to here, I was like, The drums at first were kind of really cool and kind of scratchy. It almost does sound like someone tripping over their words, but not quite, but almost. It actually reminded me of that sweet kid who went viral, like, I don't know if it was like 20 years ago, for going, have you ever had a dream that and it gave me that sort of cadence. And so that was in my head as well. It just felt like more and more people got added to the drum beat. And then it just felt like this crazy crowd. And then I started to imagine this like creature that was like made out of people. And it had like 7 arms and 3 heads. And it was just like sort of trying to move and having a really hard time, like something that we made with our technology. Next is triangles and rhombuses. All right, let's talk about triangles first. Really like this groove. I like the slower halftime grooves generally in all of music, so I was really into hearing this. The other ones had like almost a little bit more of a syncopated, punchy, mid-tempo and, even almost like hip-hop influenced kind of beat. And this one had more of like a trip-hop beat. It's really laid back. Also in between C and C sharp, so more Mixolydian. Listen to what's going on in the bass frequencies. Which is starting to get louder and louder. It's mostly over here. It's like a low rumbling. It's just like, I remember smiling because I was like, oh, this is a cute, sweet little melody. And then all of a sudden I'm like, doom. Impending doom, like run away, And then this second part, I think we should figure out on the piano, the rhombuses. Because I had those thoughts again of like, this shouldn't work, but it does. Things that made me go, what? But, oh. Also, so out of tune again. Well, again, compared to standard tuning. Da, da, da. You hear how they hung on to that one a little bit longer? Gives it a lot of life, not just a repeat. And does this sound almost like a mellotron to you? Like maybe it's the flute sample or something? Next is 6010. Oh, I like this one so far. I'm never ready for their drums. That last part reminds me of kind of like there's something random sounding about it. Just those big jumps and the lack of repetition. What I liked about this one is I could detect some really cool patterns. There was a interval, the space between two notes, that just kept moving up. I think it was, let's see, was it these? As the song went, over and over again, those. I also liked this. So there is a synth with a delay on it, which is cool. It always adds some nice rhythmic complexity. So this is all around half steps. Like everything's kind of moving by a half step so far. And then this top one, this creates this major third. And then love that dissonance. So this one went up a half step, this one went down a half step. It creates a really creepy feeling though. Oh yeah, I really like the use of the vocal samples again in the drum beat. This is a great example of like taking something that out of context would not necessarily sound rhythmic, but if you put it into the context of music and you repeat it over and over again, it begins to start sounding rhythmic. That one, the da-da-da-da, Next is Turquoise Hexagon Sun. Oh, I've heard this one time at a listening party. Out where these found sounds came from in the drum beat. My brain just doesn't want to let go. Okay, I really like this one. There's kind of the what you might call a snare. It's not really, but it takes the place of the snare or the clap, kind of the primary accent that plays off of the kick. It hits on 2 and then doesn't hit on 4. I love kind of lopsided grooves like that. So like it goes really heavy, like sub bass on that kick, or maybe it's an 808. I don't know, but it's just so to the point where if there was an actual bass line, I couldn't even hear it over the sound of that kick, just every time it hit. But this part is, the piano is beautiful. It's got a bit of a jazzy feel to me. And then it's going to go to a A major 7th. And then da-da, and then it kind of feels like a F sharp with a 6th. Right? Yeah. And then it just kind of, it feels like it wants to go here. That's kind of what my brain kept imagining, was like, but it didn't do that. It went back down to this F minor chord. So heavy. Next up is Uncanny Industries. I like that. I think it's got kind of a neat rhythmic pattern. It sounds like it's in 4/4. It's like you can definitely make sense of it, and it sounds like it's in Dorian. Dorian is very similar to Mixolydian, which we've heard a few other times in this album. Anyway, let's listen to Bakuma. that one was straight up Mixolydian and G Mixolydian again. G Mixolydian, by the way, if you want to jam on G Mixolydian and you don't have a lot of keyboard skills, never fear, because it's all the white keys. Just hold down a G. Approximately. It's kind of open suspended chord. But then it goes to an F major 7. Sorry. And that's sort of the basis of it. I think. Do-do-do-do. That's such a pretty progression, honestly. And then there was like a melody over it. So that was, you know, that one was definitely, to me, honestly, the most accessible thing we've listened to this whole time. And I didn't feel creeped out at all. It was like really pleasant and pretty, and I liked the rhythm. The there was these really quick little trills, you know, like which sounds so cool on a synth like that. I think they have this sort of bleeding sound, not bleeding, bleating. Next is, oh, I think I might have heard this one, Roig Biv. Beautiful. Okay, so there's a lot of, you know, ornate moves that the bass is doing, but essentially, like, it's kind of main notes or F sharp. It's like do 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 do, and then da da da. And then go back. Then to B. Okay. Okay, got it. So. It's cool. There's a part where the bass drops out and the chords are just there kind of by themselves, maybe with the melody, maybe not. And they sound a little bit more pop. But then the bass comes back in, and then the way the bass interacts with the chords, it's like, ooh, it kind of shakes things up a bit. I really enjoyed them being separated and then coming back together. There's something very metallic happening on the snare hit. Like they've layered the snare with, I think, some kind of metal hit. So it's just, yeah, it swings a little bit. That part is so pretty. And then lands on this note, which I just love that kind of dissonance. Is that what it's doing? It's really pretty and cool. Next is called Rue the Whirl. Ooh. the sample they picked, again, repeated over and over again. And it could have come from, I mean, it sounded musical, right? Like it's from music, but that particular section of whatever song or songs it came from creates this kind of persistent B minor chord. Sorry. And then there's like this pretty doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and that, oh, I'm sorry. And then there was like a melody that went over it, and that was also in B minor. So, you know, they were like, oh yeah, there's that chord, this sounds good over it, or something like it's reversed a little bit. But this was dreamy, but it had a little bit of that DJ Shadow kind of vibe to me. Really great hip hop groove and something sampled from, I don't know, music that had a lot of like romance to it. Probably was from the 50s or 60s, you know, and the quality of the recordings then were so different. It has kind of that quality, just more lo-fi perhaps. Yeah, there's beautiful kind of strange melodies over it. Next is Aquarius, which I think I have maybe also heard. That bass is tasty. That's cool. First of all, the chord progression for this section was, again, not in the standard tuning, but the closest note I could find would be B flat to F major to A major to E major. So they're all major chords. So this, that's not weird. That's very typical. We hear that all the time. But then it going to this, and it has the same relationship to this chord, this A to E, as this one does to F. But the way those two pairs are related is very strange. They don't belong in the same key at all. So it's again that sort of dichotomy of like, I recognize this and I don't. Something familiar, something completely unusual, something comforting, something that's off-putting. And then on top of that, I mean, I was thinking like, if you take the whole production and you even keep in the orange and the giggling child, but you just made the chord progression something that everyone recognizes, really standard, I do not think that that song would sound off-putting at all. I actually think it is their chord choices that made that so interesting. I mean, the other stuff is interesting too, but it's like they've got like they sampled like I think a funk guitar really well. This has it's very groovy, and the bass is really tasty and kind of funky, and the vocal samples are really playful. The water, the child, the orange, and even the counting, is just very like uh kind of psychedelic, and you have the innocence of the child with these like kind of weird harmonies. Olsen. Ooh. Oh. I've heard this. Oh my God, I love this. Yes. Oh gosh. Until they kind of dropped out the more distorted chords from the left side, and you could really hear the piano by itself. I wasn't positive, but I thought I was hearing a certain kind of chord called an add 9, and I absolutely love it, and they're all about it in that piano. Okay, so again, this is kind of between C and C sharp, I think. So I'll just play it in C. We have, they play E flat major, F major, and C. I am obsessed with the sound of this distorted. Those just, what was it? All right. And you could hear the, okay, so, oh, I'm sorry. So you hear the C again on the top. Creates some continuity. It's beautiful. But yeah, I love the way this sounds. Just, it's so textural. It's like red in my head. It's like red and orange, like burning embers. And it's like, it's just so like visual. By the way, this is like a mode mixture kind of chord progression where again, these chords are all major and they wouldn't be in the same key together. So you get beautiful chromaticism. Right here. And then this gorgeous melody. Is that what it is? Oh. So what's so pretty about this one? This is this 10th note in the chord, 7th, and then the 9th. It's just beautiful. It's dissonant. but they're related in a really understandable way. Just a third. That's how all of our chords are built. Sorry. And then there's this beautiful pattern you can recognize of dun 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 dun. Right, these pairs. Also, I love the way it kind of precedes the chord. Right, there's kind of like a cascade. But then the piano it starts to come in, and you can hear what it's doing. Okay, so. So the add 9, it's like you have a major or minor chord, then you go up a whole step from the root. And in this case, they're in closed position. So there's all this clashing as opposed to, which is more spread, but it's just like all together. Sorry. I actually have a song that kind of does something like that. And then the second time though, I also do this in my song. Maybe I was inspired by this. I don't think I've heard this very often, but could have stuck in my brain. That one, sorry, this one is voiced a little differently. Okay, so it's just this chord. First time, I think it actually just play major, and then, and the second time, they just kind of hang on the 9th instead of giving you the whole 3rd and everything. So yeah, they're brilliant. I love it. Okay, next is Pete Standing Alone. I really like this one, Pete Standing Alone. There was almost a moment where the chords reminded me of Olsen so much. It might have just been a coincidence, but maybe they're connected. Maybe that's why Olsen comes before Pete Standing Alone. Maybe it's Pete Olsen? I don't know. Yeah, everything's in between. But the drum beat on this one was sick. The kind of wow sample was really quite a surprise, but the rest of it had this kind of cool electro sound. It's very detailed. There's a lot of like sounds in their drums that don't sound like drums, but it doesn't sound just like a mishmash of Foley or anything. It's a little bit more balanced, but they're cool. All these grooves are really cool. They're all very syncopated, lots of offbeat emphasis. And they're using that synth that was in Olsen and also in Aquarius, I think, and maybe the Roygbiv. It has this certain singing sound to it, and it has those quick little jumps, like da-da, da-da, like a lot of these little grace notes, I should say, little da, which reminds me of like the 70s, like 70s synthesis. Next is called Smoke's Quantity. Sitting down. Sweet boy. a progression I kind of recognize. Flat 6, flat 7, 1, minor. Sorry. But the timing really threw me. The samples start and then the drums come in, and I was just like, they're not on the same timing at all. And so it took me a moment to like process that and let that be the way it is. Because my brain was just like, I want them to fit in some way, but my brain couldn't detect any kind of pattern there. So then I let go, and then I got distracted by my cats. So next is called Open the Light. More Mixolydian. I'm really enjoying the back half of this album. I think, even though I really like their drums, I'm also really enjoying getting a chance to get to know the harmonies without the drums, because their drums tend to be mixed and just produced very loud and punchy and kind of dominating. It's kind of nice to hear the gentle side of things, because it's almost like their songs with drums have this going on plus drums, as opposed to elements that I think sort of match the energy of the drums. There's kind of this, again, strange contrast of like kind of a drums and then like kind of dreamy, floaty, really, really low energy kind of synths and samples. Oh, right, the chord progression. So this is very pretty. It starts out a Mixolydian again. C Mixolydian. Very dreamy, but with a pedal of C on the bottom, which is very 70s. And then it switches to G major, going to B flat major, which is a very Trent Reznor move, I might say so, especially this melody is something like, kind of hangs on that tritone at first, and it's like, I wanted to call it fuzzy buttons or scratchy buttons, but I think, again, it was just a Rhodes or something that had a certain kind of texture on it, some kind of distortion that made it sound kind of scratchy and maybe a little less bassy. But it didn't have that glassy sound that I think E-piano sometimes has. Next is called One Very Important Thought.
Now that the show is over and we have jointly exercised our constitutional rights, we would like like to leave you with one very important thought. Sometime in the future, you may have the opportunity to serve as a juror in a censorship case, or a so-called obscenity case. It would be wise to remember that the same people who would stop you from listening to Boards of Canada may be back next year to complain about a book, or even a TV program. If you could be told what you can see or read, then it follows that you can be told what to say or think. Defend your constitutionally protected rights. No one else will do it for you. Thank you.
I have to think about that thought. Let's listen to Happy Cycling. Okay. Creepy. The voices. Oh, I've heard this. Oh, yeah. The vocal, there's like this kind of, it's not opera. It's just like a choral, a few women singing, excuse me. I don't know what notes. It's kind of a major third, but there's something weird again about it. And however they looped it, it just sounded like this seamless, just creepy, constant, just like, they have a line cliche. Approximately. So the bottom note you probably saw started B, then it went B flat, then A flat, then G. And they made this really cool progression out of it. The bass line followed the line cliche. And I think it's like a triplet vibraphone or something like that. Sorry. And then the variation here is the, sorry. Instead of just going and having the bass follow the G on the bottom of the line cliche, they resolved to the root of the chord in the bass. So that was kind of a fun moment listening, going like, oh yeah, they know what they're doing. Like they went to give you that really final sound at the bottom. And it's cool because after the end of the progression, there's still a bunch of measures that have to complete the phrase. And they fill it with, first of all, sort of space for a while. No bass, no melody, just the drums. And you're just sort of like waiting. And then you get your sort of sequence of events. You get the, and then, and then the C equal. I was trying to figure out why I wasn't bored for a second, because it is very repetitive. Is it because I'm looking forward to it being the same again every time? Is the space after the chord progression ends kind of giving me a moment to like rest and get ready for the next one? Or is it that I'm waiting subconsciously to see if anything changes? But when it didn't change, I didn't care. I wasn't like disappointed. I was like, oh, cool, this again. Maybe it's just when it's such a good loop, it doesn't really matter if it changes. But eventually when the section came in, like the B section, it did feel a little bit like, like finally something broke through. And then there was this interesting, different progression. And I was trying to figure it out, but I think it was again a kind of an arpeggio that just repeated the exact same pattern starting on different notes. The notes they chose, though, are very strange. But yeah, it's a dope song. You can sit into the groove and feel really like confident that it's not going anywhere. You can relax into it. And then you can also relax into the repetition as well. It becomes reliable, but it still puts me on edge. Just the quality of everything, the uncanny valley kind of sampling. You can hear the is like some sample of a human maybe doing something, and it's being like manipulated by tape, or it's getting like sped up and slowed down, and just really the way they distort humanity is very compelling. Well, thank you for sitting through this video with me. I hope you enjoyed my reactions and analysis. And if you want to support me in doing more videos like this, then check out my Patreon.